Have you ever seen someone treated like they were nothing, only for a huge secret to come out? A secret that changed everything? Imagine a grand restaurant. It had soft music and clinking forks. Rich people laughed. The staff worked quietly, often unseen. This story happened at Pearl Continental Hotel, known for its rich food and its even richer guests. Ellie was a waitress. Her uniform was neat, shoes worn. She had worked many years. Her smile was polite, but worries filled her mind. Rent was late. Her small apartment felt cold. She dreamed of a better life, free from money worries. Tonight, she put on a brave face. She carried a heavy tray of water, her arms aching. Every step was careful. This job was her lifeline. The restaurant was busy. It smelled of roasted duck and expensive perfumes. Ellie watched the diners, their faces bright, hands showing off rings. Their world was far from hers. Then, a new group entered. They were loud. A young man led them. He was tall, handsome, wearing an expensive suit. His name was Adriel Adam, son of a billionaire. His picture filled newspapers. He moved like he owned the place, barely looking at the head waiter. He walked to a large table. Ellie had seen Adriel Adam before. He came often. He always acted proud and important. He treated staff like they were invisible, or worse. Tonight, he seemed even worse. His friends, also well-dressed and loud, sat with him. Ellie took a deep breath. This was her section. Her stomach tightened. She picked up the menus. Her heart beat fast. She walked towards table 7, Adriel Adams' table. As she got closer, Michael was talking loudly. Ellie waited patiently. He finally turned. His blue eyes met hers for a second. No kindness, only annoyance. Yes? His voice was sharp. Ellie kept her smile. Good evening, Mr. Adam. Here are your menus. Michael waved his hand. Just bring champagne and food, not looking at her. Ellie nodded and walked away. A strange feeling grew inside her. This night held a big secret. A truth about Michael and Ellie would soon be revealed. Ellie went to the bar. She told the bartender about the champagne. Her hands still trembled slightly. That look from Michael, the way he spoke, it was like a cold slap. She had worked in this restaurant for 15 years. She had seen all kinds of customers. But Adriel Adam was special. He had a way of making her feel smaller than anyone else. It wasn't just his money. It was his whole attitude, like he was made of something better. She got the bottle of the most expensive champagne. It was heavy, the glass cool in her hand. She carefully placed it on a small serving tray with 2 chilled glasses. As she walked back to table 7, she could hear Michael's voice rising above the others. He was telling another story, probably about his latest big deal or a luxury car he just bought. His friends laughed loudly. They were enjoying themselves, completely unaware of the struggles of the people around them. Ellie reached the table. She gently placed the tray down. She opened the champagne bottle with a soft pop, then poured the bubbly liquid into the tall, slender glasses. Michael glanced at her as she poured. There was a smirk on his face. He watched her work, but not with respect. It was more like he was watching a machine. Ellie tried to ignore his gaze. She focused on pouring the champagne perfectly. Michael picked up his glass. He swirled the champagne, then took a long sip. This better be good, waitress. My father expects only the best. He said the word, waitress, like it was an insult, like it meant she was not important. Ellie's jaw tightened. She wanted to say something, anything, but she couldn't. She needed this job too much. She just nodded, her eyes fixed on the tablecloth. Michael then turned to his friends. You know, my father always says that quality service is hard to find these days. People just don't care enough. His friends nodded in agreement. One of them, a woman with bright red lipstick, added, It's true. They think they can just get by with doing the minimum. Ellie felt her cheeks burn. It felt like they were talking directly about her. Every word was a tiny stab. She finished pouring for everyone. She placed the bottle in an ice bucket. "I'll be back to take your food order when you're ready." She tried to keep her voice steady. Michael just waved his hand again, a dismissive flick of his wrist. "Just tell the chef to send out the best. Whatever he thinks. We're not picky, as long as it's gourmet." He didn't even look at her as he spoke. Ellie turned to leave, her heart aching. But as she took a step, she heard Michael say something else. "And make sure the staff knows who they're serving. We don't want any mistakes. This is a very important night." He put extra stress on the word, staff, making it sound like a dirty word. This was too much. Ellie stopped. She closed her eyes for a brief moment. She took a deep breath. She had to stay calm. She had to. But a line had been crossed. The words echoed in her mind. Make sure the staff knows who they're serving. It was a reminder of her place, her low position. And it hurt. It hurt more than it should. There was a strange connection in her mind, a blurry image that made his words sting even more. A sense of injustice, not just for herself, but for something much larger, began to stir within her. This feeling was growing, getting stronger. It was like a forgotten memory trying to break free. This encounter with Michael was not just a simple interaction. It was a key. A key to unlocking a truth she had buried deep inside. And the night was about to take a turn no one expected. Ellie walked away from the table. Her mind was racing. The way Michael spoke, the way he looked at her. It wasn't just a rude customer. It was something more. Each time she served him, a strange feeling settled in her chest. It was like a faint echo from a distant past, a whisper of something she tried hard to forget. But tonight, it was louder, clearer. His blue eyes, so sharp and cold, sparked a memory, a tiny flash of a baby's cry, a soft blanket, a lullaby. No, it couldn't be. She shook her head. She must be tired. She went to the kitchen. The heat and noise were a comfort. Chef Antoine, a kind man with a bushy mustache, looked at her. "Everything all right, Ellie? You look a little pale." Ellie forced a smile. "Just Mr. Adams' table, chef. They want the best of everything, no specifics." Chef Antoine sighed. "Ah, young Mr. Adam. His father is a good man, but the son. He has much to learn." Ellie nodded. She started preparing some appetizers to go out. Her hands moved on their own, peeling vegetables, arranging small plates. But her mind was still on table 7. On Michael's face. On his voice. Why did it bother her so much? She had served rude people before. But Michael was different. There was a sense of raw pain. An old wound being reopened. Every time he dismissed her, she remembered a time, long ago, when she had worked for Michael's father, Mr. Adams Sr. He was a wealthy man, yes, but also fair. He owned many businesses, including a chain of smaller diners where Ellie had first started her waitressing career. He had always treated his staff with respect. He knew their names, asked about their families. Michael was nothing like his father. He was the opposite. As she brought out the first round of appetizers, delicate salmon tartare, and tiny mushroom quiches, Michael barely glanced up. He was talking about a new sports car. It goes 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. And the leather interior. It's just amazing. He took a piece of salmon with a fork, still talking. He didn't offer a compliment. He didn't even acknowledge the food. Ellie placed the plates carefully. She refilled their water glasses. She felt invisible, like a ghost serving the living. But then, as she reached for an empty bread plate, her hand brushed against Michael's sleeve. It was a slight touch, a mere accident. But Michael recoiled as if she had burned him. "Watch it, waitress. That suit costs more than your monthly rent." His voice was loud enough for his friends to hear, and they snickered. Ellie froze. Her face flushed hot. Humiliation washed over her. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Adam. It was an accident. Her voice was barely a whisper. Michael just glared at her. Just be more careful. Some people don't understand the value of things. He said it slowly, clearly, making sure she got the message. Ellie wanted to disappear. She wanted to run away. But she stood her ground. She forced herself to meet his gaze for a moment. And in that moment, something shifted inside her. The pain, the humiliation, it turned into something else. A flicker of defiance. A sudden, powerful urge to stand up for herself. Not just for herself, but for all the invisible people like her. For all the years of silent suffering. The room seemed to shrink. The noise faded. It was just her and Michael. His eyes, those cold blue eyes, were just like someone else's she once knew. They were like the eyes of a baby she had held, a baby she had loved with all her heart, a baby she had given up, a baby who would now be a grown man, a baby she called Michael. The world spun. Her breath caught in her throat. The truth, so long buried, was bursting forth. It couldn't be. But what if it was? What if this arrogant, cruel young man was her son? The question hammered in her chest, a terrifying, beautiful possibility. She stood there, trembling, a secret hanging in the air, about to change everything. The thought hit Ellie like a physical blow. Adriel Adam, her son? It was impossible. Yet, the way his blue eyes had pierced her, the way his voice, despite its harshness, held a familiar echo. All the small moments, the vague feelings, the unsettling sense of recognition that had been building since he walked in, it all crashed down on her. Could it be? After all these years? Her hands started to shake, a tremor she couldn't hide. She gripped the empty bread plate tighter. Michael, still oblivious, laughed at something one of his friends said. He didn't notice her sudden stillness, the way her eyes were wide with a mix of terror and wonder. He was too caught up in his own world, his own importance. Ellie had been only 18 when she gave birth to a baby boy. She was young, alone, and without a penny to her name. Her own family had turned their backs on her. It was a time of great shame and sadness. She had made the hardest choice a mother could ever make. She had placed her newborn son into the arms of a kind woman from an adoption agency, hoping he would have a better life than she could offer. The woman had promised her that her son would go to a loving, wealthy family, a family who could give him everything. She had been told he would be raised in comfort, never knowing hardship. She had never known his new name, never seen his new parents. Until now, the Thorne family was one of the wealthiest in the city. Mr. Adams Sr. and his wife had always been known for their generosity. They had adopted a child many years ago. Everyone knew that. But the details were always kept private. Ellie had heard the rumors, of course, but she had never connected them to her own son. Never dared to hope or fear that her child was part of that powerful family. Now, looking at Michael, a chilling wave of recognition washed over her. The strong jawline, the way he carried himself, even that hint of stubbornness in his eyes, it was all too familiar. It was like looking into a distorted mirror, seeing parts of herself and parts of a ghost she barely remembered. A ghost of a baby, now a man. Her mind raced back to the day she said goodbye. The tiny, soft bundle in her arms. The way his small hand had gripped her finger. The pain had been so deep, so raw, she thought she would never heal. She had tried to move on, to build a new life, to forget the past. But how could you forget a part of your own heart? She watched Michael again. He was complaining about the food not being brought out fast enough. Where's the rest of our dinner? This service is truly slow tonight. He snapped his fingers in the air, not at her, but generally, at the universe, expecting it to respond. Ellie flinched. The arrogance, the coldness. How could this be her son? The child she had given up, hoping he would find love and kindness, had grown into this. A knot formed in her stomach. Fear mixed with a strange kind of hope. If he was her son, did she have a right to know him? To tell him? What would it do to him? To her? To his adoptive parents, who had given him everything? The questions swirled, leaving her dizzy. She gripped the plate so tightly, her knuckles turned white. She couldn't just stand there. She had to do something. But what? The weight of this secret, suddenly revealed, felt crushing. She knew, with a terrifying certainty, that her life was about to change. She just didn't know how, or if she was ready for it. The truth was out, at least in her mind, and it hung heavy, ready to fall. Ellie knew she couldn't act on this sudden, powerful feeling without more proof. The idea that Michael was her son was just a thought, a gut feeling born from a fleeting resemblance and a deep, buried memory. She needed something more, something concrete. But what? How could a waitress in a fancy restaurant, serving a billionaire's son, ever find that kind of proof? She went back to the kitchen, her mind still reeling. Chef Antoine noticed her troubled look again. "Ellie, are you sure you're okay? You seem a little off." Ellie just shook her head. "I'm fine, chef. Just a long night." She tried to sound normal, but her voice was a little shaky. She helped carry out the main courses. Roasted duck for Michael and his friends, with fancy sauces and tiny vegetables. As she placed the plate in front of him, Michael didn't even look at her. He was still complaining, now about the market. Honestly, the market is so unpredictable these days. Lost a fortune on that last tech stock. His friend, a tall man with a thin mustache, laughed. "You lose more on your lunch than most people make in a year, Michael." They all laughed. Ellie watched him. She tried to find any small sign, any familiar gesture. His hands, as he picked up his fork. His laugh, which was a little too loud, a little too forced. Was it her imagination? Or did she see a faint scar above his left eyebrow? A tiny mark she remembered seeing on her baby boy's forehead, from a small scratch just after he was born? It was so long ago, the memory so faded. She couldn't be sure. The more she watched, the more a strange mix of emotions swirled within her. Anger at his arrogance, pity for the lost, kind boy she hoped he might have been, and a powerful, undeniable maternal ache. She wanted to hug him and scold him all at once. She wanted to tell him that money wasn't everything, that kindness mattered more than any stock market gain. Later, as Michael and his friends were finishing their meal, he called her over. "Waitress, another bottle of champagne. And dessert for everyone. Just bring out a selection." He said it with a wave of his hand, not bothering to make eye contact. He was talking on his phone, already distracted. Ellie nodded. As she turned to walk away, she saw a small, framed photo tucked into the inside pocket of Michael's open jacket. He had taken it out to show one of his friends. It was a picture of a smiling couple, clearly his adoptive parents, and a small boy. A younger Michael. Ellie's breath hitched. She caught a glimpse of the photo, just for a second, but it was enough. The woman in the photo was Mrs. Thorne, Michael Sr.'s wife. But the man in the photo, the father, was Mr. Adam Sr. And next to them, a much younger Michael, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, with the same bright blue eyes. The photo confirmed her worst fears and her greatest hopes. The Thorne family, the wealthy, kind family who had adopted a child all those years ago. It was him. It was her son. The confirmation hit her with the force of a tidal wave. She felt lightheaded, her knees threatening to buckle. She had found him. The child she had given up was now this man, sitting at her table, treating her like dirt. She stumbled slightly as she walked away, her mind in a blur. The champagne, the desserts, none of it mattered now. Only one thing did: the truth. She had to process this, to understand what it meant. What did she do now? Did she reveal herself? What would happen if she did? The question screamed in her head. The open loop of her past had just slammed shut, revealing a future she had never imagined. And the weight of this knowledge was almost unbearable. This dinner, this ordinary night, was anything but. It was the night her past came back to haunt her, and to challenge everything she thought she knew about life, fate, and motherhood. Ellie gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. Her breathing was shallow. She closed her eyes, trying to calm the storm raging inside her. Michael was her son. The arrogant, dismissive young man was her flesh and blood. The child she had lovingly carried and then painfully given away. It was a truth too huge to fully grasp. Chef Antoine walked past, noticing her again. "Ellie, you really don't look well. Perhaps you should take a break." Ellie just shook her head. "No, I'm fine. I need a moment." She knew she couldn't take a break. Not now. Not when her entire world had just been turned upside down. She remembered the adoption papers, signed with a trembling hand, promising secrecy. The agency had assured her that her identity would always remain private, and she had agreed. She had wanted him to have a clean slate, a chance at a life free from her own humble beginnings. She had wanted him to have the watch, best, and he had gotten it. He had a powerful name, wealth, and all the advantages she could never have given him. But he had also grown into a man who treated people like her with disdain. The contrast was like a punch to the gut. The loving, kind boy she had hoped for versus the entitled young man at table 7. How had he become this way? Was it the wealth? The lack of knowing his true story? She felt a pang of guilt, wondering if her choice had somehow led to this. If knowing his real mother would have made him a different person. She knew she couldn't just walk up to him and say, "I'm your mother." The idea was absurd, dangerous even. It would shatter his world, and probably ruin hers. The Thorne family, his adoptive parents, were powerful people. They would not take kindly to a waitress suddenly appearing and claiming their son. She could lose her job, maybe even face legal trouble for breaking the terms of the adoption. But how could she remain silent? How could she continue to serve him, knowing the truth, pretending she was just another nameless face? Every time he snapped his fingers, every time he spoke down to her, it felt like a fresh wound. It was not just an insult to her as a waitress. It was an insult to her as his mother. A deep ache settled in her heart. She wanted to reach out, to connect with him, to tell him that he wasn't alone, that he had another mother who loved him. But the barrier between them was too great. A wall of wealth, status, and a lifetime of unspoken secrets. She was the invisible servant, and he was the prince. She grabbed a tray of desserts, a rich chocolate cake, a delicate fruit tart, and creme brulee, and started walking back to table 7. Her steps felt heavy, like she was carrying the weight of the world. Each footfall echoed the questions in her mind. What would happen if she spoke? What would happen if she didn't? As she approached the table, Michael was laughing loudly again, recounting some extravagant story. His friends were hanging on his every word, their faces alight with admiration. He truly believed he was at the center of the universe. Ellie placed the desserts in front of them, her hands steady despite the turmoil inside. She looked at Michael, truly looked at him, not as a customer, but as her son. His blue eyes, so like her own, held a spark of youthful mischief, but also a hint of something else, something she couldn't quite name. Was it insecurity? A need for approval hidden beneath the arrogance? She didn't know. She knew one thing for certain. She couldn't let this night pass without trying to connect with him on some level. Not as his mother, not yet, but as a human being. To perhaps plant a seed, a tiny question in his mind, that might one day lead him to question his own assumptions. She took a deep breath. She had to be careful. One wrong word could ruin everything. But the truth was too powerful to keep silent forever. The moment was coming, a dramatic turning point, and she knew she had to prepare for it. Ellie took a moment. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She had to choose her words carefully. She couldn't reveal everything. Not now, not here. But she couldn't stay silent either. There was a way. She felt it. To reach him, even a little, without revealing the giant truth. Michael, still laughing, picked up a piece of the chocolate cake. Finally, dessert. You know, for a restaurant of this caliber, the service is shockingly slow tonight. He said it to his friends, but his eyes flicked to Ellie, a clear jab at her. His friends nodded, some looking at Ellie with slight amusement. Ellie felt a surge of indignation. This was her son, criticizing her, belittling her, while she stood there, carrying the weight of their shared history. It was too much. The carefully constructed wall she had built around her emotions started to crack. She took a slow, deep breath, gathering her courage. She looked directly at Michael, her gaze steady. Mr. Adam, with all due respect, the kitchen staff works very hard. We aim to serve everyone efficiently. Her voice was soft, but firm, with a slight tremble she couldn't quite hide. It was the first time she had ever spoken back to a customer, especially one like him. Michael stopped mid-chew. His laughter died. He put down his fork and stared at her, surprised. His friends also fell silent. The air in the restaurant seemed to thicken. No one talked back to Adriel Adam. "Excuse me? Did you just talk back to me?" His voice was low, dangerous. He was not used to being challenged. Ellie's hands clenched behind her back. She knew she was risking her job, everything, but she couldn't stop. The words were coming, fueled by years of silent suffering and a lifetime of regret. "I merely stated a fact, Mr. Adam. Sometimes, what one expects and what one gives are two very different things." She wasn't just talking about service anymore. She was talking about respect, about kindness, about life. Michael's blue eyes narrowed. He leaned forward, his face hardening. "Are you lecturing me, waitress? Do you know who I am?" His voice was cold, filled with warning. His friends looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. Ellie held his gaze. A tiny, painful smile touched her lips. "Yes, Mr. Adam, I believe I do." Her voice was barely a whisper now, filled with a meaning only she understood. She was hinting, not outright saying, that she knew his real identity, a deeper one than his wealth and name. The unspoken truth hung heavy between them. Michael stared at her, clearly puzzled by her words, by the strange intensity in her eyes. He had expected her to apologize, to back down. But she didn't. Her defiance was unexpected, jarring his carefully constructed world. He looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time that night. And in her tired, resolute eyes, he saw something that stopped him. Something familiar, something that stirred a faint, uncomfortable echo within him. He frowned, trying to place it, but he couldn't. His mind, trained on business deals and social status, couldn't grasp the depth of what was happening. He just saw a rebellious waitress. But Ellie had planted a seed of doubt, a seed of curiosity. A tiny crack in his armor. The silence at the table was thick with unspoken words. This small act of defiance was a turning point. It was the moment Ellie stopped being just a waitress and started becoming a voice. A voice that carried a secret so profound it would soon change everything. And Michael, arrogant and unaware, was about to be caught in its wake. The stage was set for a dramatic reveal. A confrontation unlike any other. Michael slowly leaned back in his chair. He didn't speak. His friends remained silent, eyes darting between him and Ellie. The whole restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Ellie stood there, waiting. Her heart was pounding, but a strange calm had settled over her. She had said her piece. She had shown him that she was not just a tool to be used. Michael's face was a mixture of anger and confusion. He wasn't used to anyone challenging him, especially not someone he considered below him. He clearly struggled to find a comeback. His usual sharp remarks seemed to fail him. Ellie's quiet defiance had thrown him off balance. Then, one of Michael's friends, a loud man named David, tried to lighten the mood. "Come on, Michael. Don't let a little attitude ruin the night. We're here to celebrate." He clapped Michael on the shoulder, trying to get him to smile. Michael ignored him. His gaze was still fixed on Ellie. The familiarity he'd felt, the strange sense of being seen, even judged, by this woman, bothered him. It was a feeling he couldn't shake, a puzzle his arrogant mind couldn't solve. "What exactly do you mean by that, waitress? What one expects and what one gives?" He narrowed his eyes, demanding an explanation. Ellie knew this was her chance. Not to reveal the whole truth, but to make him think, to make him see beyond himself. "I mean that true value isn't just in what you own, Mr. Adam. It's in how you treat others, in the kindness you show, in the respect you give, even to those you believe are beneath you." Her voice was still soft, but it carried an undeniable power. Her words were like a small, sharp knife, cutting through the thick wall of his arrogance. Michael flinched slightly. He looked away for a second, then back at her. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Not his father, not his friends. They always agreed with him, always praised him. He was used to being flattered, not challenged. He tried to laugh it off, but it sounded forced. "Oh, so now you're a philosopher? You think you know anything about my life, about what I value?" He waved his hand dismissively again, but this time, it lacked its usual force. Ellie took another step closer to the table. She looked him straight in the eyes. Her own eyes, usually filled with worry, now shone with a deep, unwavering emotion. "I know enough, Michael." She used his first name, softly, deliberately. The intimacy of it, the unexpected familiarity, made him freeze. It was a subtle, yet powerful, move. It implied a connection, a history, that no mere waitress would have. Michael's eyes widened. He looked utterly stunned. He stared at her, his mouth slightly open. The use of his first name, by a servant, was an unforgivable breach of etiquette in his world. But it was more than that. It was the way she said it, the deep, knowing look in her eyes. It was a direct hit to his sense of self, his carefully crafted image. A shiver ran down Michael's spine. He felt a sudden, cold dread. Who was this woman, and what did she know? He had seen that look before, perhaps in an old photograph, a faded dream. But where? The arrogance began to chip away, replaced by a growing unease. He suddenly felt vulnerable, exposed. The control he always had, the power he always wielded, was slipping. The restaurant, once a blur of noise and activity, now felt utterly silent. All eyes were on them. Ellie had stepped out of her role, crossed a line, and in doing so, had forced Michael to truly see her. And in seeing her, he was about to discover a truth that would change his life forever. The reveal was moments away. The tension was unbearable, building to an emotional explosion. Michael felt a chill run through him. His name, spoken so gently yet with such authority by a waitress. It was deeply unsettling. He gripped the edge of the table. "How dare you use my first name? You are a waitress. You have no right." His voice was low, but laced with a new kind of fear, not just anger. His friends exchanged worried glances. This was not the usual Michael. Ellie ignored his outburst. She kept her gaze fixed on him. Her heart was racing, but she knew she had to finish what she started. The truth was too important, too heavy to keep hidden any longer. "It was time. I have every right, Michael. More right than you can ever imagine." Her voice trembled slightly, but it was strong. A silence fell over the table, so profound it seemed to suck all the air from the room. Michael looked at her, truly confused now. What was she talking about? What right? What could this woman, this ordinary waitress, possibly have over him, the son of a billionaire? Ellie took another deep breath. Her eyes were suddenly bright with unshed tears, but her resolve was stronger than ever. She knew this would shatter his world, and possibly hers. But she couldn't back down. Not after all these years. Not after seeing him become this way. When you were born, I was just a girl, 18 years old, alone. I had nothing to give you but my love. And I knew that wasn't enough to give you the life you deserved. Her voice broke slightly, filled with raw emotion. Michael just stared, his face pale, his eyes wide. His friends looked at each other, utterly bewildered. Ellie continued, her voice gaining strength. I made the hardest choice a mother can make. I gave you up. I placed you into the arms of a woman from an agency, hoping she would find you a wonderful family. A family who could give you everything. And they did. They gave you the Thorn name, the wealth, the opportunities. Michael's jaw dropped. He looked like he had been struck. He shook his head slowly, disbelievingly. No, that's impossible. My mother is Mrs. Thorn. You're a waitress. This is some kind of sick joke. He tried to dismiss it, to wave it away like a pesky fly. But his hands trembled, betraying his inner turmoil. Ellie's eyes filled with tears that finally spilled over, tracing paths down her tired cheeks. It's no joke, Michael. I held you in my arms when you were hours old. I watched you sleep. I sang to you. Your eyes. They were the same deep blue then, as they are now. She reached into the pocket of her apron, pulling out a small, faded silver locket. She hadn't worn it in years, but she always kept it close. This was my mother's. I wore it the day I gave you up. It was the only thing I had to remember that day. She didn't open the locket, but just held it, a silent, powerful proof. Michael looked at the locket, then back at her face. The raw pain in her eyes, the familiar lines around them, the way her hand trembled. It was all too real. The coldness he usually felt towards her was replaced by a crushing wave of guilt and confusion. He remembered his adoptive parents telling him he was adopted when he was a child. They had always been kind and loving, and he had never questioned it. He knew he had a birth mother somewhere, but she was a vague, distant idea, not a living, breathing person, standing in front of him, serving his dinner. And certainly not this woman, this waitress he had treated so poorly. The full weight of his past behavior slammed into him. Every dismissive wave, every rude comment, every time he had acted as if she were less than human. He had treated his own mother with such disdain. A wave of nausea washed over him. He felt sick to his stomach. One of his friends, sensing the deeply personal nature of the moment, quietly stood up. Michael, maybe we should give you some space. The others quickly followed suit, gathering their things. They mumbled apologies and quickly made their exit, leaving Michael alone at the large, round table with Ellie. The restaurant, which had previously been full of quiet whispers, was now truly silent, with all eyes fixed on them. The maitre d', Monsieur Dubois, who had witnessed the entire scene from a distance, slowly approached, concern etched on his face. But he paused, sensing the incredible intimacy and gravity of the moment. Choosing not to interrupt, Michael finally pushed back his chair, scraping it loudly against the polished floor. He stood up, his gaze still fixed on Ellie. He was breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling fast. He looked utterly lost, like a child who had suddenly realized he was in danger. Why? Why now? Why didn't you ever say anything? His voice was filled with a mix of anger, confusion, and deep hurt. The question was not an accusation, but a plea for understanding. Ellie, still crying, took a step closer. She had waited for this moment, planned for it in her heart for years, and now it was here. She knew she had to answer him, to explain everything, to finally bridge the vast chasm that separated them. This was the true climax, the point of no return. Their lives, irrevocably linked, were now on a path to either reconciliation or complete rupture. The fate of their relationship, decades in the making, hung in the balance. Ellie looked at Michael, tears still streaming down her face. I couldn't, Michael. When I gave you up, I signed papers. I promised to stay silent. I wanted you to have a life free from my struggles. A life I couldn't give you. Your adoptive parents, they were good people. They gave you everything. Michael took a shaky step back, running a hand through his hair. But you watched me. You saw how I treated you tonight. All these times I came here, you just let me treat you like that? His voice was filled with self-loathing, the arrogance completely gone. He saw the horror of his actions reflected in her tear-stained face. Ellie nodded slowly. Yes, it hurt every single time, more than you can ever know. But I thought it was what I deserved, for giving you up, and I didn't want to disrupt your life. You seemed happy, successful. What right did I have to suddenly appear and upset your world? She looked down at her worn hands. Michael's eyes fell on her hands, then on her uniform, on the tired lines around her eyes. He had seen these things before, but he had never truly seen them. Now, they screamed a story of hardship and sacrifice that he, in his comfortable world, had never had to face. He remembered his words, "That suit costs more than your monthly rent." The cruel irony of it twisted in his gut. But why tonight? What changed? He pleaded for an answer, needing to understand this sudden explosion of truth. Ellie looked up, her gaze meeting his once more. Because tonight, you pushed too far. I saw the man you'd become. Arrogant, dismissive. It hurt to see you treat anyone like that, especially knowing what I knew. And I saw something else, Michael. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I saw a flicker of the boy I remembered, the one I hoped you would be, and I couldn't stay silent anymore. I had to try. She paused, taking a ragged breath. I didn't expect to say anything. I certainly didn't plan for this. But when you spoke to me, when you looked at me with such contempt, I couldn't bear it anymore. Not from you. I just had to tell you. Michael looked around the now mostly empty restaurant. The other diners were still staring, some openly, some pretending not to. He felt exposed, vulnerable. He suddenly felt a profound loneliness, even though his mother was standing right in front of him. He had spent his life thinking he was self-made, a product of his adoptive parents' world. Now, his entire identity was shifting beneath his feet. He thought of his adoptive parents. They loved him deeply. He loved them. What would this do to them? What would it do to him? The questions are too big, too overwhelming. He suddenly felt very, very young. He was not the powerful businessman anymore. He was a son, faced with a mother he had unknowingly scorned. Ellie watched him, her heart aching. She saw the shock, the pain, the confusion in his eyes. She saw the battle raging within him. This was not the reunion she had ever imagined, not in her wildest dreams or her darkest fears. But it was happening, and she knew that whatever came next, their lives were forever intertwined, forever changed by this one unforgettable night. She had laid bare her deepest secret. Now, the ball was in his court. What would he do with this shattering truth? Michael stood frozen, grappling with Ellie's words. The weight of her sacrifice, the years of silent suffering, and his own cruel ignorance pressed down on him. He looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. Not a servant, but a woman who had carried him, loved him, and made an impossible choice for his future. The anger and confusion began to melt, replaced by a deep, aching sadness and a dawning sense of shame. I don't know what to say. I've been a terrible person to you. His voice was raw, filled with regret. He didn't know how to apologize for a lifetime of disrespect, especially when it was directed at his own mother. Ellie simply shook her head. You didn't know, Michael. You couldn't have. But now you do. And that changes everything. She wiped a tear from her cheek. A profound silence settled between them. Michael looked around the restaurant. The expensive decor, the remnants of his lavish dinner, and felt a sudden hollowness. All his wealth, all his status, meant nothing in the face of this raw, human truth. He had everything, but he had lost so much, unknowingly. Monsieur Dubois, the maitre d', discreetly approached. "Ellie, may I speak with you for a moment?" His voice was kind, gentle. He knew something deeply personal had just happened, and he wanted to offer support, or at least privacy. Ellie turned to Monsieur Dubois. "Yes, Monsieur Dubois. Please, take the rest of the night off. Go home. We can handle things here." He looked at Michael with a gaze that was stern, yet understanding. He seemed to communicate, without words, that he knew the gravity of the situation and respected Ellie's decision. Michael watched this exchange, a new realization dawning on him. Ellie wasn't just a waitress. She was respected here. She had a life, a community, despite her struggles. And he had just trampled all over it. Ellie looked back at Michael. "Michael, I need to go. I need to think." Michael nodded slowly. He finally felt the full impact of her words, of her truth. He saw the years of pain, the incredible strength it must have taken for her to keep this secret. And he saw himself, a spoiled, arrogant young man who had no idea of the sacrifices made for him. "Wait, please. Can we talk? Somewhere else? Tomorrow?" He reached out his hand, hesitantly, towards her. It was a gesture of desperation, a plea for connection, not the usual demanding flick of his wrist. Ellie looked at his outstretched hand, then at his face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by vulnerability, by a deep need for understanding. It was the face of the son she had given up, the boy she had hoped would be kind and good. She saw a glimmer of that boy, finally, breaking through the hardened shell of the man. Ellie paused for a long moment. She knew this was a monumental decision. It meant opening herself up to even more pain, more uncertainty. But it also meant a chance for something new, something profound. She looked at the maitre d', who gave her a reassuring nod. "Yes, Michael. Tomorrow. We can talk." She didn't take his hand. Not yet. But the promise was there, a fragile bridge built between two worlds that had just collided. She turned and walked towards the staff exit, leaving Michael alone in the grand, silent restaurant, a man utterly transformed by the truth. He stood there, watching her go, a million thoughts racing through his mind. His expensive suit felt heavy, his wealth suddenly meaningless. He had just met his mother, and the journey to truly knowing her, and himself, had just begun. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he could never go back to being the person he was before tonight. The unexpected reversal had happened, and now the real work of redemption would begin. Michael spent a restless night. The grand comfort of his penthouse apartment felt cold and empty. Ellie's words, her tears, the raw pain in her voice, replayed in his mind. He saw his own arrogant face reflected in the dark windows, remembering every dismissive gesture, every cutting remark he had directed at her. The shame was overwhelming, a burning fire in his gut. He thought of his adoptive parents. How could he tell them? They had given him everything. He loved them deeply. This revelation felt like a betrayal to them, even though it wasn't. He knew he had to talk to them, but first, he had to talk to Ellie. He had to understand. He had to make amends. The next morning, Michael arrived at the Pearl Continental Hotel before it opened. Monsieur Dubois was surprised to see him. "Mr. Adam? Ellie isn't in yet. She has the morning off." Michael nodded. "I know. I'm waiting for her." He spoke quietly, humbly. Gone was the demanding tone. He waited for an hour, then two. When Ellie finally arrived, dressed in simple clothes, her face still tired but resolute, she stopped short when she saw him. Michael stood up, his posture uncertain. He was dressed in a simple shirt and trousers, no expensive suit today. He looked younger, more vulnerable. "Ellie, thank you for coming." He didn't use her last name, didn't use Waitress. He spoke her name with respect. Ellie looked at him, her expression a mix of caution and a faint, hopeful warmth. Michael, I thought you would be angry. Michael shook his head. How could I be? You gave me a life. I I just wish I hadn't spent so much of it being a jerk. A small, sad smile touched his lips. I wish I had known. They sat at a quiet table in the empty restaurant, the same table where he had insulted her just hours before. The place, usually a symbol of his privilege, now felt like a stage for their raw, open truth. Ellie began to tell him her story, gently, carefully. She spoke of her youth, her struggles, the impossible decision. Michael listened, truly listened, for the first time in his life. He asked questions, not with judgment, but with genuine curiosity and a growing sense of awe for her strength. I always knew you were adopted, Michael. Your parents told me when I was small. They were wonderful. They gave me everything. They did. And I love them. This doesn't change that. But you're my mother, too. My birth mother. And I'm so sorry, Ellie. For everything. His voice cracked with emotion. He reached across the table, his hand hesitant. Ellie slowly, carefully, took his hand. It was warm, strong. A wave of relief washed over her. A connection made after decades of separation. A bridge built between two worlds, two souls. It was not a grand reunion, not a sudden embrace. It was a quiet, tender moment of understanding, a first step towards healing. Michael looked at their clasped hands, then at her face. He saw her wrinkles, her tired eyes, but now also the incredible strength, the deep love that had guided her through a lifetime of sacrifice. He made a promise to himself in that moment. He would honor her, not with money, but with respect, with kindness, with a lifetime of making amends. The arrogant billionaire's son was gone. In his place was a son, finally ready to truly see his mother. This was not the end of their story, but the powerful, unexpected beginning of a new one, filled with hope, redemption, and a connection that transcended all obstacles.